She had worked in the small cafe for years. Every day she put on her apron, tied her hair back, and faced the customers with a smile, even when some of them were rude. She was quiet, always polite, and never asked for special treatment. People often overlooked her, seeing only the uniform and the tray of coffee or food she carried. They did not see the long hours she spent practicing something she loved. Music had always been her passion, but life had kept her busy in ways that made it hard to follow her dreams fully. Still, she never let go of it completely. In the early mornings, before the cafe opened, she would sit on the small bench by the corner and play her imaginary piano in her mind. She could feel the keys under her fingers even when she was only thinking. The songs were simple at first, just melodies she remembered from her childhood. But over time, she could play complicated pieces without needing an instrument. Music was her secret, her world where nothing could touch her. It was a place where she felt free and alive. The cafe where she worked was popular, especially among the city's wealthy. The tables near the windows often had people in suits or elegant dresses. They came to show off, to be seen, and sometimes to make others feel small. She had learned to smile politely while ignoring their judgment. She served them their cappuccinos and sandwiches, listened politely when they spoke to her, and quickly moved on without showing any sign of frustration. But inside, she kept a quiet fire burning. She wanted to show them that she was more than just a waitress. That particular day started like any other. She arrived early, unlocking the door, turning on the lights, and arranging the chairs neatly. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, comforting her. She loved this part of the day, the calm before the rush, when she could breathe and prepare herself. But she also knew that soon, the cafe would be filled with people who might not see her for who she really was. The morning crowd came in slowly at first. She greeted each customer with a soft voice, taking their orders, serving them with care. Some smiled at her, others barely acknowledged her presence. But she remained patient, reminding herself that this was part of her job. She had learned not to take it personally. She had dreams bigger than this room, bigger than these tables, and she refused to let anyone take that away from her. Around mid-morning, the cafe started to get crowded. She moved between the tables with practiced grace, balancing trays and refilling cups. Then she noticed them, the group of wealthy patrons who always seemed to find her. They wore expensive suits, sparkling jewelry, and confident expressions. She had served them many times before, and she knew their habit of making subtle, sometimes not so subtle remarks about the staff. Today they seemed especially focused on her. One of them laughed quietly and whispered something to another. She felt their eyes on her, weighing her like she was some sort of curiosity. Her heart sank slightly, but she forced herself to keep smiling. She approached their table and took their order, her hands steady even though her stomach fluttered. They made a few jokes, trying to make her uncomfortable, and she answered politely. She could feel the tension, but she didn't let it show. She had learned long ago that arguing with them would not help. They wanted to see a reaction, and she had learned to keep her dignity. After serving their drinks, she returned to the counter, where she took a deep breath. This was the moment she usually allowed herself to think about music. She imagined the piano in her mind, feeling the keys under her fingers, hearing the notes as if they were playing in the room. Music always gave her strength. It reminded her that she had something special, something no one could take away. It reminded her that she was more than a uniform or a job. As she wiped the counter, one of the wealthy patrons called her over. His voice was smooth but had an edge of mockery. He asked if she could play something on the cafe's small piano, which was rarely used. She hesitated. She knew her chance had come, but part of her was scared. What if they laughed at her? What if she made a mistake? But then she remembered the years she had spent learning in secret, the countless hours of practice and dedication. She had prepared for this moment without even knowing it. She walked to the piano slowly, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze. Her fingers hovered above the keys, and she took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost shy, but they carried a beauty that made the room quiet. People stopped talking, leaning back in their chairs, surprised by the sound. She felt the music flow through her, filling the room and her heart with a sense of power she had never felt before. Each note was a statement, a declaration that she was more than anyone had assumed. The wealthy patrons looked at each other, their expressions shifting from amusement to disbelief. The sound of her playing was mesmerizing. She didn't rush. She let each note linger, letting the music speak for her. The cafe, once filled with chatter and laughter at her expense, was now silent. She had captured everyone's attention without saying a single word. The power of her talent was undeniable. As she played, she noticed small changes in the room. The mockery had disappeared. People were leaning forward, eyes wide with admiration. She realized that in that moment, she was not just a waitress serving coffee. She was an artist, a storyteller, someone capable of moving people with her skill and passion. Her heart swelled with pride, not because she wanted to prove them wrong, but because she had finally shared a part of herself that had been waiting for this moment. When she finished, there was a pause, a moment of silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Then, slowly, people began to clap. Not just polite clapping, but genuine appreciation. She looked at the faces of the wealthy patrons, and for the first time, she saw respect. Their laughter and mockery had vanished, replaced by awe and admiration. She smiled quietly, feeling a mix of relief and joy. She had done it. She had shown them who she really was without needing to speak. She returned to her counter, her heart still racing but filled with a quiet satisfaction. The cafe continued as usual, but something had changed. She felt stronger, more confident, and more certain of her own worth. Music had given her the courage to rise above the mockery and reveal her true talent. And she knew that this was only the beginning. Her journey was far from over, but now, she had a moment she could always remember. A moment when she was seen not just as a waitress, but as a person with a gift that could touch the hearts of everyone around her. The day continued, but the atmosphere in the cafe had shifted. The group of wealthy patrons sat at their table, still whispering to each other, their eyes occasionally darting toward her. She could feel their attention, heavy and focused, like a weight pressing on her shoulders. She tried to remain calm, serving drinks and clearing tables as she always did, but every glance from them reminded her of the subtle mockery she had endured. They laughed quietly among themselves, speaking in tones meant to be heard only by each other, but she sensed every word. She moved to a nearby table to pour coffee for a couple of regular customers. They greeted her warmly, thanking her for the drink, but she could hardly focus on their kind words. The wealthy patron's laughter had a sharp edge, a sting that made her stomach twist. She wondered why people found it so easy to judge others. Did they feel better about themselves when they made someone else small? She had long stopped asking that question aloud, knowing it would never change them. Still, inside, a fire began to build. She wanted to prove that she was more than they imagined, but she had to be careful. Anger was not her weapon. Her talent was. She tried to ignore them as she continued her work, taking orders and serving meals with practiced efficiency. She noticed the small smirks and the way they rolled their eyes when she approached. Stung, yes, but she reminded herself of the piano in the corner. That instrument, though rarely touched, was her sanctuary. Music was her voice when words failed, her shield against cruelty. Just the thought of it gave her a little courage, a spark of hope that maybe today she could finally let the world see her true self. Then, without warning, one of the patrons leaned forward with a smirk and asked, "Can you even play anything? Or are you just good at serving coffee?" His words were sharp, designed to humiliate. The others laughed quietly, glancing at her as if expecting her to fail. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her face calm. Inside, she felt a mix of nerves and determination. This was the moment she had been waiting for, though she had not realized it until now. She walked slowly toward the piano, each step measured, feeling the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. She sat on the bench and placed her fingers over the keys, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She could hear the laughter and whispers fade into the background as she focused on the music. Her hands moved carefully at first, playing simple notes that gradually grew into a melody full of emotion. The sound was soft but captivating, and she could sense the change in the room immediately. Conversations hushed, and even the regular customers turned to listen, drawn in by the unexpected beauty. The wealthy patrons exchanged looks of surprise, their smirks faltering as they listened. They had expected something clumsy, a performance that would confirm their assumptions, but instead, they were met with grace and skill. The notes flowed effortlessly, each one telling a story, expressing feelings she had carried inside for years. She had never felt so alive, so powerful. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of her soul, a way to speak when words could not. As she continued, her confidence grew. The melody became richer, more complex, and she added little flourishes that made the music shimmer. She noticed the patrons leaning back in their seats, their expressions shifting from skepticism to awe. One of them, who had been particularly mocking, now stared at her with wide eyes, unable to look away. She felt a quiet satisfaction, but not arrogance. This was not about revenge. This was about showing who she really was. The cafe, once filled with the low hum of chatter and occasional laughter, had become a concert hall in miniature. The music wrapped around the room, softening the atmosphere and captivating everyone present. She could see the change in people's body language, the way they straightened in their chairs, the way their eyes followed her hands as they danced across the keys. Her heart pounded, but it was not fear. It was joy, pure and unfiltered. She allowed herself a small smile as she continued playing, knowing that this moment would stay with her forever. She thought of all the times she had practiced in secret, of all the nights spent alone with her music, and she felt a sense of vindication. Not vindication against the wealthy patrons, but a recognition of her own perseverance and talent. She had nurtured this skill quietly, faithfully, and now it had the power to silence doubt and disbelief. The patrons tried to hide their surprise, but it was impossible. The music had broken through their preconceptions, their need to mock and belittle. They were listening now, truly listening, and she could see respect in their eyes. It was a strange feeling, to hold such power without saying a word. She had learned long ago that words can be misunderstood, but music is universal. It speaks directly to the heart, and right now it was speaking loud and clear. As the piece reached its crescendo, she felt a wave of emotion sweep through her. She had never played like this in public before, never had an audience that mattered so much to her in this way. The notes rang out, bold and confident, carrying her pride, her passion, and her quiet defiance. She knew that when she finished, there would be no laughter, no mockery. Only the truth of her talent laid bare for everyone to see. Finally, she played the last note, letting it linger in the air. There was a moment of silence, a pause so long it seemed like the world had stopped to listen. Then, slowly, a few claps began, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. She looked up and saw the faces of the wealthy patrons, their expressions filled with surprise, admiration, and perhaps a little guilt. They had underestimated her, but she had shown them that appearances can be deceiving. She rose from the piano, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The cafe had returned to its usual rhythm, but something intangible had changed. People were looking at her differently now, not with the casual dismissal of before, but with recognition. She had revealed a piece of herself that had been hidden for so long, and in doing so, she had earned a small but meaningful respect. Returning to her duties, she carried herself with a quiet pride. The wealthy patrons still sat at their table, no longer laughing or mocking. They spoke in low tones, occasionally glancing her way, perhaps reconsidering their assumptions. She smiled politely, serving their orders as she always had, but now there was a subtle difference in her demeanor. She moved with the ease of someone who knows their worth, someone who has faced judgment and emerged stronger for it. She thought about the future as she wiped down tables and refilled cups. Today had been a turning point, a reminder that talent and dedication cannot be hidden forever. She could not predict what opportunities might come from this moment, but she felt ready to embrace them. Music had always been her companion, her refuge, and now it had become her voice in the world. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would lead her to places she had only dreamed of. As she continued to play, the room seemed to transform around her. The simple cafe was now filled with the rich, flowing sound of the piano, and with each note, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known in public before. Her fingers moved gracefully, touching each key with care and intention. The melody she played was not just music. It was a story of her life, her struggles, and her dreams. Each chord spoke of years of quiet dedication and the desire to be seen for who she truly was. The wealthy patrons sat in stunned silence, no longer sneering or making snide remarks. They leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected talent they had never imagined could exist in someone they had dismissed so casually. Some of them exchanged glances, their eyes wide in surprise. They had expected a poor imitation, something to confirm their prejudices, but they were instead faced with raw skill and emotion. The contrast between their expectations and reality could not have been more striking. She played with increasing confidence, letting her emotions guide her hands across the keys. The music swelled and dipped like waves, carrying with it a story of quiet resilience. She remembered the nights she had practiced alone, when only the moon and stars witnessed her talent. She thought of the discouragement she had faced in life, the people who had told her to give up, the moments when she doubted herself. But now all of that seemed distant. Here, in this moment, she was not invisible. She was powerful, commanding attention without needing to say a word. The cafe patrons, both regular and wealthy, were completely absorbed. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the piano's rich, resonant sound. She noticed subtle changes in their posture. The way they leaned forward, the way they held their hands, the way their eyes followed her every move. Even those who had mocked her earlier could not help but be drawn into the beauty of what she was creating. They were no longer judging her. They were witnessing something extraordinary. Her heart pounded, but it was not fear. It was exhilaration. The music allowed her to express feelings she had kept hidden for so long. Each note carried a piece of her soul, and she felt a deep connection with everyone in the room. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between her world and theirs. It spoke of hope, courage, and the beauty that can come from perseverance. She realized that this was her moment to shine, and she embraced it fully. As she played, the wealthy patrons' expressions softened. The laughter and mockery that had filled the room earlier were replaced with awe and admiration. One of them, who had been particularly harsh, now looked at her with an expression that mixed surprise and respect. The change was almost palpable. She had not only captured their attention but also challenged their assumptions in a way that could not be ignored. The power of her music had shifted the dynamics in the room completely. The regular customers also watched with amazement. Many of them had known her for years, seeing only the polite, hard-working waitress who served their coffee. Now, they were witnessing a hidden side of her, a side they had never imagined. The music revealed her depth, her passion, and her humanity. People who had overlooked her before now looked at her differently, seeing her not just as a server, but as a person with extraordinary talent and a story worth listening to. She began to play a faster, more intricate piece, her fingers flying over the keys with precision and grace. The music filled every corner of the cafe, creating an atmosphere of wonder and excitement. She felt a surge of energy as the melody grew more complex, and she allowed herself to fully immerse in the moment. The years of practice, the long nights of dedication, the quiet moments of doubt, all of it had led to this instant. She was living the result of her hard work, and it felt incredible. The wealthy patrons could no longer hide their astonishment. Their eyes followed her hands, their mouths slightly open in disbelief. Some exchanged words in whispers, unable to contain their surprise. The person they had mocked so easily had become the center of attention, the one holding the room in thrall. Their judgment had been replaced with admiration, their laughter silenced by the undeniable skill and emotion pouring from her fingertips. She played with a mixture of strength and vulnerability, weaving a story that resonated with everyone present. The music spoke of struggle, of perseverance, of the quiet dignity that comes from working hard and believing in oneself. It was a story that transcended words, a language that everyone could understand. She felt a deep connection with the listeners, as if the piano had become a bridge between her heart and theirs. In that moment, she realized the true power of her talent. As the piece neared its climax, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. The notes grew bolder, more expressive, each one carrying a piece of her soul. She could see the impact of her music on the people in the room, the way they were leaning forward, the way their eyes were wide with wonder, the way their bodies seemed to absorb every sound. She had never felt such a direct connection with an audience before, and it was both exhilarating and humbling. She slowed down as the piece approached its final notes, letting each sound linger in the air. The room was silent, filled with a sense of anticipation and awe. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had given everything she had to the music. When she finally pressed the last key, there was a moment of stillness, as if time itself had paused. Then, slowly, the applause began, growing louder and stronger with each passing second. The wealthy patrons clapped along with everyone else, their faces showing a mixture of surprise, admiration, and perhaps a hint of regret for ever doubting her. She had captured their attention, their respect, and their hearts, all without saying a word. The power of her music had transformed the room, changing the way people saw her and, perhaps, how they saw themselves. She rose from the piano bench, her heart still racing but filled with a sense of accomplishment. She returned to her duties, but the atmosphere in the cafe had shifted. People were looking at her differently, treating her with a newfound respect. Even the wealthy patrons, who had mocked her so easily before, now regarded her with a mixture of awe and humility. She had proven something important, not just to them but to herself. She was capable of so much more than anyone had imagined. As she moved between tables, serving drinks and clearing dishes, she felt a quiet confidence she had never experienced before. The music had given her a voice, a way to express herself that went beyond words. She had faced judgment and mockery and had responded not with anger, but with skill, grace, and authenticity. It was a lesson she would carry with her always. She thought about the future, about the possibilities that might open up because of this moment. Today had been a turning point, a reminder that talent and perseverance can overcome even the harshest doubts. She had shown that true skill and passion cannot be hidden forever, and that when the right moment comes, it can shine in ways that change everything. She felt ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she had already taken a significant step toward her dreams. The music had transformed the cafe, filling it with warmth and energy. Every note she played carried not just skill, but emotion, telling a story of patience, struggle, and quiet determination. She could feel the audience listening intently, their eyes wide with awe and curiosity. The wealthy patrons, once mocking and dismissive, now leaned forward, completely absorbed in her performance. The way the music flowed from her fingers created an unspoken connection between her and everyone in the room. She noticed small changes in their expressions. Some were moved to whispers, sharing soft remarks with each other about the unexpected talent before them. Others simply sat still, their hands folded in front of them, as if they could barely comprehend what they were hearing. She had expected surprise, but not this depth of attention. It was more than acknowledgement. It was respect, and it filled her with a sense of quiet pride. She played with a new level of confidence now, letting her emotions guide the melody. Each key she pressed told a story, a part of her life that she had never been able to express openly. She remembered the years she had spent practicing in secret, the lonely nights filled with hope and frustration, the moments when she wondered if she would ever be noticed. All of it had led to this moment, and she let herself feel the power of it fully. The wealthy patrons watched her intently, no longer laughing or whispering cruelly. Their earlier mockery had disappeared, replaced by awe and admiration. One of them, who had been particularly scornful, now sat back in silence, unable to look away. He could see the skill, the passion, and the dedication in her playing, and he could no longer deny the talent he had once dismissed. It was a humbling sight, and she felt no anger toward him, only a quiet sense of triumph. She had proven herself without confrontation, letting her gift speak for her. She continued to play, her hands moving with ease and grace across the keys. The melody was rich and full, carrying with it a sense of hope and resilience. She had learned to pour her emotions into her music, to let each note reflect a piece of her soul. Now, with the audience fully captivated, she felt the freedom to express herself completely. The music was no longer just a private escape. It had become a bridge connecting her to everyone present. The cafe had become a different place entirely. The hum of conversation was gone, replaced by the soft resonance of the piano. People stopped what they were doing, drawn in by the unexpected beauty. Regular customers, who had known her only as a polite waitress, now saw a different side of her. They watched in amazement as she played with skill, passion, and confidence. For them, the performance was not just entertainment. It was a revelation. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she played, knowing that she had captured the hearts and minds of her audience. The wealthy patrons could no longer dismiss her. They could see her talent, her dedication, and her humanity. It was a lesson in humility for them, and a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. She had faced their mockery with grace, and in doing so had earned their respect. The music flowed seamlessly from one piece to another, each melody building on the last. She played with emotion, letting the story unfold naturally. The notes spoke of her struggles, her perseverance, and the joy she found in her passion. She had learned to channel her feelings into her playing, and now, with everyone watching, it had an even greater impact. The cafe was filled with a sense of wonder, as if the music had opened a door to something extraordinary. As she reached the climax of her performance, she felt a wave of exhilaration. The music soared, filling every corner of the room, and she felt a connection with her audience that she had never experienced before. She could see the awe in their eyes, the way they leaned forward, and the way they were completely absorbed. The wealthy patrons, who had once mocked her, now looked at her with admiration and respect. She had earned their attention, and more importantly, she had earned their acknowledgement of her talent. The final notes lingered in the air, and she allowed herself a moment of stillness. The cafe was silent, the audience captivated by the performance they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began. It was soft at first, hesitant, but it grew steadily, filling the room with sound. She looked at the faces around her and saw genuine appreciation. The wealthy patrons, the regular customers, everyone was clapping, their expressions a mix of surprise, admiration, and respect. She rose from the piano bench, her heart racing with a mix of exhaustion and joy. She returned to her duties, serving drinks and clearing tables, but the energy in the cafe had shifted. People looked at her differently now, not with casual dismissal or mockery, but with recognition and respect. Even the wealthy patrons, who had been her harshest critics, now regarded her with awe. She had shown them a side of herself they had never seen, and it was a powerful feeling. As she moved through the cafe, she noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. Conversations were quieter, filled with admiration for the performance they had just witnessed. Regular customers whispered to each other about her talent, sharing their surprise and amazement. The wealthy patrons spoke in low tones, their earlier mockery replaced by thoughtful observation. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that her music had touched everyone in the room in some way. She thought about the journey that had led her here, the years of practice, the quiet determination, the moments of doubt. All of it had culminated in this performance. She had faced judgment and mockery, yet she had responded with skill, grace, and authenticity. The music had given her a voice, a way to express herself that went beyond words. It had allowed her to connect with others on a deep, emotional level, and she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. The applause continued, and she allowed herself a small, grateful smile. She had discovered the power of her talent and the impact it could have on others. She had proven that true skill, dedication, and passion cannot be hidden, and that when the right moment comes, it can shine in ways that change the perception of everyone around you. She felt ready for whatever opportunities might come next, knowing that she had taken a significant step toward her dreams and had shown the world the strength of her character and her artistry. After the final notes echoed through the cafe and the applause had settled, she returned to her duties, but she felt different inside. Something had shifted, not just in the room but in herself. She carried herself with a quiet confidence she had never felt before. The music had been more than a performance. It had been a declaration of who she was. She was no longer just the polite, hard-working waitress. She was someone with talent, determination, and a voice that could touch hearts. The wealthy patrons who had mocked her earlier were now quiet, thoughtful, and respectful. Some of them approached her, hesitant at first, and complimented her playing. Their words were sincere, tinged with the realization that they had misjudged her. She smiled politely, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. She didn't need their approval to know her worth, but it felt good to see their change in attitude. She had faced ridicule and come out stronger, and her talent had done what words never could. The regular customers were also in awe. Many whispered among themselves, talking about how they had never imagined she could play like that. They shared their surprise and admiration, and some even asked her questions about how she had learned to play so beautifully. She answered with a humble smile, explaining that she had practiced quietly for years. She wanted them to understand that talent often comes from persistence, dedication, and a love for what you do, not just luck or opportunity. She returned to the counter and served drinks, but the atmosphere in the cafe had changed completely. People treated her differently now, not just with respect for her talent, but with a deeper appreciation for her as a person. They saw her not as someone to be mocked or overlooked, but as someone who had something special to offer. It was a powerful feeling, knowing that she had changed the way people perceived her without raising her voice or demanding recognition. Her coworkers also noticed the change. They smiled at her with a new understanding, perhaps even admiration. She had always been kind, hardworking, and patient, but they could now see a side of her they had never witnessed. It reminded them, and maybe everyone in the room, that quiet strength and talent often go unnoticed until they are revealed in the right moment. As the day continued, she reflected on what had just happened. She realized that her performance had been more than just a demonstration of skill. It had been a moment of truth. She had shown herself and others that perseverance, practice, and self-belief could overcome mockery and doubt. The applause, the astonished looks, and the newfound respect were just the visible parts of a deeper victory. The true triumph was internal. She had proven to herself that she could face judgment and shine regardless. Later, as the cafe began to quiet down and customers left, she had a moment to breathe. She sat at the counter, her hands still tingling from playing the piano. The satisfaction she felt was not just from the applause but from the realization that she had shared a part of herself that had long been hidden. The piano had been her voice, and through it, she had connected with people in a way that nothing else could. It was a reminder that everyone has hidden talents, and sometimes, all it takes is one moment to reveal them to the world. She thought about the future with renewed hope. Today had opened doors, not just in the eyes of the patrons, but within herself. She knew that opportunities might come, perhaps invitations to perform, recognition from others, or simply the confidence to continue sharing her talent wherever she went. But even if nothing changed outwardly, she had already won. She had faced mockery, embraced her passion, and emerged stronger and more confident. That was a victory no one could take away. The music had also left a lasting impression on the wealthy patrons. They had come expecting to judge and leave satisfied in their superiority, but they had been humbled by her talent. Some approached her with questions, others with compliments, and a few even asked if she performed elsewhere. Each interaction was a reminder that genuine skill and passion cannot be hidden, and that when someone dares to reveal it, they can touch the lives of those around them profoundly. As she cleaned up for the day, she reflected on the journey that had led her here. The long hours of practice, the quiet determination, the moments of self-doubt, all had been worth it. The piano had always been her companion, her private world, but now it had become her bridge to others. She realized that sharing her gift did not diminish it. It amplified it, allowing others to see a part of her that words could never convey. When she finally closed the cafe and stepped outside, the evening air felt fresh and invigorating. She walked slowly, thinking about the day and the unexpected way her life had changed in just a few hours. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. The applause, the recognition, and the respect she had received were reminders that talent and perseverance eventually shine through, no matter how quietly they have been nurtured. As she walked home, she imagined the possibilities ahead. Perhaps she would have the chance to perform more, to share her music with a wider audience, or even inspire others who had hidden talents of their own. But more than that, she felt a deep sense of pride in herself. She had faced mockery, uncertainty, and doubt, and had emerged victorious. She had shown the world, and more importantly herself, what she was truly capable of. That night, she sat by the piano at home, reflecting on the day. She played a few gentle notes, savoring the feeling of the keys under her fingers and the music flowing through her. She smiled, knowing that this was more than a hobby or a secret talent. It was her voice, her identity, and her strength. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the courage, the skill, and the heart to face them with grace. The story of that day would stay with her forever. It was a reminder that true talent cannot be ignored, that perseverance and dedication are powerful, and that courage often comes from embracing what makes you unique. She had faced mockery and doubt, yet she had remained true to herself and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more visible than ever before. And with that realization, she felt ready to embrace whatever the future might hold, knowing that she had already achieved something extraordinary. She had touched hearts with her music, and in doing so, had found her own voice.